"Mom, you're late on the support payment." That was all Jessica said when I finally answered the phone, after 3 days of ignoring her calls. Her voice had that calculated chill she'd perfected over the years, as if she were speaking to an ATM. I smiled as I held the phone to my ear, a smile she couldn't see, but one I could feel growing from somewhere deep in my chest, because for the first time in 28 years, I had something she didn't know. For the first time, life was about to teach her what she had never understood. Just a week ago, everything had seemed normal. It was Sunday afternoon, and I was in my small kitchen making meatballs, the recipe my mother had taught me, the aroma of oregano and garlic always filling the whole house. The golden afternoon light filtered through the yellow curtains I had sewn myself, creating long shadows that reminded me of my childhood. Everything was in its place. The blue ceramic plates I had bought at the farmer's market, the wooden table I had inherited from my grandmother, the photo of Olivia smiling in her 8th grade school picture hanging on the dining room wall. Jessica had arrived promptly at 5 o'clock, as she always did when she needed something. She was wearing that black dress that made her look thinner, her hair perfectly straight from a visit to the most expensive salon in town. Her nails were impeccable, painted a deep red that contrasted with the paleness of her hands. Kevin trailed behind her, wearing that fake smile that never reached his eyes, carrying a bottle of wine that probably cost more than I made in a week. "Hey, Carol," he said, kissing my cheek with a forced familiarity that always made me uncomfortable. "Smells amazing in here. Right, Jessica?" But Jessica was already checking her phone, typing something with a concentration she reserved only for things that truly mattered to her. Not for the meatballs I had been cooking since 3 in the afternoon. Not for the table I had set with my best tablecloth. Not for me. "Where's Olivia?" I asked. As I always did, because my granddaughter was the only reason these family Sundays still existed. Jessica barely looked up for a second. "She's at a friend's house. Had to study for a test." A lie. I knew it immediately, from the way her eyes darted to the left, from how her fingers kept fiddling with her phone. Olivia had texted me that very morning, asking if she could spend Sunday with me. But when I told her that her mother was coming for dinner, she simply replied, "Oh, I see," with that trailing ellipsis that said more than 1,000 words. During dinner, I noticed things I had ignored before. The way Kevin looked at every detail of my house, as if he were taking inventory. His eyes lingered too long on the new television I had worked so hard to buy, on the china cabinet where I kept my mother's dishes, on the discreet jewelry I was wearing. Jessica, for her part, barely touched her food. She picked at the meatballs as if they were a social obligation, while talking about her new job at a boutique downtown. "It's just temporary," she said, waving her hand as if it were nothing, "just until things settle down." But there was something in her voice, a tension she couldn't quite hide. Kevin constantly interrupted her, finishing her sentences, explaining things she hadn't asked. "Jessica is incredibly talented," he'd say. "She just needs the right opportunity." And I would nod, smile, pour more wine, pretending I didn't see the way he controlled every word that came out of her mouth. It was when he got up to go to the bathroom that I saw it. Kevin picked up his phone and started taking pictures. Of my living room, of the kitchen, of the frames with family photos. He did it discreetly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, but I was watching him from the reflection in the dining room window. My heart began to beat faster, a silent alarm going off in my chest. Why was he photographing my house? What did he need those images for? When Jessica returned, her attitude had subtly changed. There was a different energy in her movements, as if she had made an important decision while she was alone. She sat on the edge of her chair, no longer relaxed as before. "Mom," she said, and her voice had that forced sweetness she used when she wanted something big. "We need to talk about something important." Kevin nodded gravely, as if they were partners in some serious business deal. "I've been thinking a lot about us," Jessica continued. "About our relationship, about everything that's happened." Her eyes filled with tears that seemed genuine, but they came too quickly, too perfectly. "I feel like we've never had the chance to really be mother and daughter, you know. There's always been so much distance between us." Kevin placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of support that looked rehearsed. I listened in silence, feeling how each word dug into some vulnerable place in my soul. Because it was true. There had always been distance. Ever since she was 15 and got pregnant with Olivia, ever since she decided I was to blame for all her problems, ever since she turned every conversation into a list of my failures as a mother. But now, sitting in my kitchen, watching her perfect tears and Kevin's hand on her shoulder, something inside me turned cold. "What are you proposing?" I asked, and my voice sounded calmer than I felt. Jessica exchanged a quick glance with Kevin, and I knew they had prepared for this moment. "Well," he said, taking control of the conversation, "we think it would be good for everyone if Jessica and Olivia moved in here with you. Temporarily, of course. My house was small, just 2 bedrooms, but that didn't seem to matter to them. That way, you could get to know each other better," Jessica added, "and Olivia would have more stability." The word stability echoed in my ears like an alarm bell. My granddaughter had always lived with Jessica, moving from one apartment to another every 6 months, changing schools, constantly adapting to her mother's impulsive decisions. And now, suddenly, they were worried about her stability. I looked at Kevin, who avoided my gaze, and then at Jessica, who awaited my answer with poorly disguised anxiety. "That's an interesting proposal," I said finally, and I saw their faces light up with a hope that turned my stomach, because I understood, in that exact moment, that this had nothing to do with me, or with Olivia, or with repairing our relationship. This was about something else entirely, something I couldn't yet identify, but that was already planting its roots in my intuition like a poisonous seed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake until 3 in the morning, tossing and turning in my bed, replaying every detail of that conversation. Kevin's photographs, the sudden proposal, Jessica's all too perfect tears. Something didn't add up, like when you're trying to assemble a puzzle and one piece is forced into the wrong place. At dawn, I decided to do something I had never done before: investigate my own daughter. I started innocently enough by checking her Facebook profile. Jessica had always been active on social media, posting photos of every meal, every outing, every moment she considered worthy of showing the world. But lately, her posts had changed. They were no longer just selfies in expensive restaurants or photos of new clothes. Now there were strange posts, vague comments about absent mothers and childhood wounds. One in particular caught my eye. Some mothers never learned how to truly love. Their children grow up with voids that ache for a lifetime. Number toxic motherhood. Number healing childhood trauma. The post had hundreds of likes and supportive comments. "So powerful, Jessica. You're so brave for sharing this. Narcissistic mothers cause so much damage." Every comment was like a stab in the back. But I kept reading. I needed to understand what was happening. In the comments, Jessica responded with more details. "My mother always prioritized her job over me. I never had the emotional support I needed. Now that I'm a mother, I see all the damage she caused." Lies. Every word was a carefully constructed lie. I had worked 2 jobs for years to support her after the divorce. I had missed important meetings at work to go to her school plays. I had sold my own jewelry when she wanted to go on a graduation trip with her friends. But in her version of the story, I was the villain, the cold mother who had emotionally abandoned her. I kept digging and found something that chilled me to the bone. In a Facebook group called Children of Narcissistic Mothers, Jessica had posted a photo of me without my permission. It was an old picture, from when I was 40, where I looked serious because I was worried about the end-of-the-month bills. The caption read, "This is my mother. Look at her eyes. Do you see the coldness? The lack of empathy?" This is what I grew up with, seeing that look that never told me I was good enough. The comments were merciless. Hundreds of people who didn't know me, weighing in on my character, calling me a narcissist, suggesting that Jessica should cut me out of her life completely. My hands were shaking as I read. How long had she been doing this? How many people now believed I was a bad mother based on these lies? But the worst was yet to come. In a more recent post, Jessica had written, "I'm considering taking legal action against my mother for emotional abandonment. It's time for toxic mothers to pay for the damage they cause. My daughter will not grow up with the same traumas I lived through. Emotional abandonment. Legal action." The words floated in my mind like fragments of a nightmare. I Googled what that meant exactly and found information about lawsuits for parental psychological damage. Although they were rare, Precedents existed where adult children had sued their parents for emotional neglect. Most didn't succeed, but the process alone could drag on for years and cost thousands of dollars in legal fees. It was Monday morning when I decided to call Olivia. I needed to hear her voice, to make sure she wasn't part of this perverse plan. My granddaughter answered on the third ring, her voice sleepy because it was early. "Grandma Carol," she said. And in those 2 words, I heard so much genuine affection that I almost started to cry. "Can I ask you something important, sweetheart?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course. What's wrong? Has your mom talked to you about me lately? About our relationship?" There was a long pause, too long. When Olivia spoke again, her voice had changed. It sounded more cautious. "Well, yeah, a little. She says she's worried about you, that you act strange sometimes." Strange? My own granddaughter thought I was acting strange because her mother had planted those ideas in her head. "What kind of strange things?" I asked, though I knew I didn't want to hear the answer. "I don't know. She says you forget things sometimes, that you repeat the same stories, that you get angry for no reason." Each word was like a slap. Jessica wasn't just destroying my reputation publicly. She was also manipulating my granddaughter, preparing her to believe that I was losing my mind. "Olivia, honey, have you noticed anything strange about me?" The question came out with more desperation than I had intended. My granddaughter sighed. "No, Grandma, you've always been the same to me. But Mom says that people with problems don't always realize they have them." Problems. Jessica had planted the seed in my own granddaughter's mind that I had mental problems. After hanging up, I sat in my empty kitchen, surrounded by the morning silence, and I finally understood the entire plan. Jessica didn't want to move in with me to repair our relationship. She wanted to establish a narrative where I was a negligent and possibly mentally unstable mother. Kevin's photographs weren't random. They were documenting my house, my lifestyle, looking for any evidence they could use against me. The lawsuit for emotional distress was just the first step. If they managed to prove I was an unfit mother, they could argue I was also an unfit grandmother. They could limit my access to Olivia, and if they managed to plant doubts about my mental stability, they could go for more. They could question my ability to handle my own affairs, my money, my house. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was a young man with a clipboard, dressed in a shirt and tie despite the heat. "Carol Delgado?" he asked with a professional smile. I nodded, though something in my stomach tightened. "I'm from the law firm of Martinez and Associates. May I come in? It's about a family matter." My heart started beating so hard I was sure he could hear it. I invited him in. I offered him coffee. I tried to act normal while he arranged his papers on my dining room table. "Your daughter Jessica has contacted us," he began, his voice kind but firm. "She is concerned for your well-being and that of your granddaughter. She has mentioned some incidents that have led her to consider legal options to protect the minor's interests." Incidents? What incidents? I hadn't had any incidents with Olivia. "I don't understand," I said, and my voice sounded smaller than I would have liked. The lawyer nodded sympathetically. "It's natural to be confused. Sometimes people in your situation don't realize how their actions affect others. In my situation, as if I were a senile old woman who didn't know what she was doing. Your daughter has provided us with documentation that suggests a pattern of erratic and irresponsible behavior that could put the minor's emotional well-being at risk." Documentation. What documentation? Kevin's photographs? Screenshots of conversations taken out of context? Testimonies from people who didn't even know me, based on lies from Facebook? "I'd like to review that documentation," I said, trying to sound firm. The lawyer smiled, that condescending smile reserved for the elderly and the weak. "Of course, everything will be presented at the appropriate time. For now, we are offering an amicable solution. If you agree to voluntary supervision during your visits with the minor and undergo a psychological evaluation, we can avoid a long and costly legal process. Voluntary supervision. Psychological evaluation." The words hung in the air like toxic smoke. This was exactly what Jessica had planned. To turn me into the crazy grandmother who needed supervision to be with her own granddaughter. "And if I refuse?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Then we will proceed through the appropriate legal channels." a lawsuit for emotional neglect, and possibly a request for a restraining order on visitation until your capacity to maintain a healthy relationship with the minor is determined. After the lawyer left, I sat in my living room for hours, watching the daylight slowly fade. Everything was silent, except for the ticking of the wall clock I had inherited from my mother. A clock that had marked the seconds of my life for so many years and now seemed to be counting down toward some end that I hadn't chosen, but that others had designed for me. The next few days were like living in a psychological thriller where I was both the victim and the sole spectator. Jessica had completely changed her strategy. She no longer feigned affection or sought reconciliation. Now she acted as if she had already won, as if I were just a minor obstacle to be removed with the least possible resistance. On Wednesday morning, as I was having coffee in my kitchen, the phone rang. It was Jessica, but her voice had a false sweetness that made my skin crawl. "Hi, Mom. How have you been? I hope you've had time to think about our conversation on Sunday." Our conversation, as if it had been a dialogue between equals and not a carefully planned ambush. "I've thought a lot," I replied, measuring each word. "Good," she said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "Kevin and I have been making plans. We already spoke with the landlord of our current apartment, and we can break the lease without penalty if we move out by next month." Without penalty, that meant they had already negotiated, that they had already made the decision, regardless of what I said. "Jessica," I began, but she interrupted me with that crystalline laugh she had perfected since childhood when she wanted to get her way. "I know you're nervous, Mom. It's natural. It's been so many years since we lived together. But it's going to be wonderful for Olivia to have her grandma around every day. You can help her with her homework, make her those soups she loves so much. It'll be like the family we never had." The family we never had. Every word was a dagger wrapped in velvet, because we had had a family. An imperfect family, yes, but a family nonetheless. A family that broke when she decided I was to blame for all her problems. When she turned every visit into a courtroom where I was always found guilty, with no right to a defense. "And where would you sleep?" I asked, knowing my house had only 2 small bedrooms. "Oh, we've thought about that," Jessica replied with the confidence that comes from having everything planned. "Kevin and I can stay in your room temporarily. You can use the sofa in the living room. It's very comfortable. Olivia would use the small room. It'll just be until we find something bigger for all of us." My room. My bed. My most private space handed over to 2 people who had just shown me they were capable of anything to get what they wanted. "Jessica, I need more time to think about it," I said, trying to buy time to fully understand what I was getting into. Her response was immediate, as if she had been waiting for those exact words. "Mom, we don't have a lot of time. We've already made the necessary arrangements. Besides, the lawyer who visited you yesterday told us you seemed confused about some things. Maybe it's a good idea for us to be close by to help you get more organized." The lawyer had reported our conversation to her. Of course. I had been so naive to think that visit was just a veiled threat. It had actually been an assessment, a way to gather more ammunition to use against me. "What lawyer?" I asked, feigning confusion. Jessica sighed with that exaggerated patience adults use with difficult children. "Mom, Mr. Martinez. He came by yesterday afternoon. Don't you remember?" This is exactly what we're worried about. These little memory lapses could be signs of something more serious. Little memory lapses. I remembered perfectly every word of that conversation, every detail of that threat disguised as a friendly offer. But Jessica was building a narrative where I was losing my memory, where my refusal to accept her plans was evidence of mental decline. "I remember perfectly," I said firmly. "I just wanted to make sure we were talking about the same lawyer." Her laugh sounded forced. "Of course we are, Mom. I'm just worried about you." That afternoon, Jessica showed up at my door unannounced. She was accompanied by Kevin and a woman I didn't recognize, an older woman with gray hair and a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mom," Jessica said, kissing my cheek as if we were the most loving family in the world. "I'd like you to meet Mrs. Davis. She's a social worker specializing in family issues. We thought it would be good for her to talk to you before we move in, to make sure the transition is as smooth as possible for everyone, especially Olivia." A social worker. They had brought a social worker to my house without my consent, as if I were an incompetent old woman who needed an official evaluation. Mrs. Davis extended her hand with that condescending smile that was becoming all too familiar. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Delgado. Your daughter is very concerned about you and your granddaughter's well-being. We just want to make sure everyone is in the best possible situation." I invited them in because refusing would have been interpreted as another sign of my supposed instability. We sat in my living room while Mrs. Davis took out a notebook and began asking questions that sounded casual but clearly had a specific purpose. "How do you feel about the idea of having your family live here? Do you feel prepared for the changes this will involve in your daily routine? Have you had any health problems lately that might affect your ability to care for others?" Every question was a carefully designed trap. If I said I was excited, they would confirm I had accepted the plan. If I said I had doubts, they would document my resistance as evidence of irrationality. If I mentioned any normal ache of my age, they would be creating a medical file that could be used against me later. Jessica played the part of the perfect daughter throughout the visit. "My mother has been so strong her whole life," she'd say, with genuine-looking tears in her eyes. "She worked so hard to raise me after the divorce. But now I see that she needs support, even if she doesn't want to admit it. It's typical of her generation, you know? They don't like to ask for help." Mrs. Davis would nod understandingly while writing notes in her notebook. Kevin, for his part, had become the ideal son-in-law. "Carol is like a second mother to me," he'd say, with that perfected fake sincerity. "We just want to make sure she's well taken care of." Sometimes older people become too isolated. They lose touch with reality. We don't want that to happen to her. Older people. As if my 55 years automatically made me a senile old woman. When they left, after 2 hours of interrogation disguised as a family visit, I was left alone with the terrible certainty that I had just been evaluated and probably failed by an expert who only knew the version of events Jessica had carefully constructed. That night, while washing the dishes we had used for tea, I found something that froze my blood. A small digital recorder hidden behind the sugar bowl. Kevin had placed it there during the visit, probably when he offered to help me serve the tea. They had recorded our entire conversation without my knowledge. Every word I had said, every tone of doubt or frustration in my voice, was now in their hands to be used as evidence of my supposed mental instability. The next day, Friday, Jessica called me early. Her voice had that forced cheerfulness of someone about to deliver news they know won't be well received. "Mom, I have wonderful news. Olivia is so excited about the move that she's already started packing her things." I also spoke with her school principal, and she agrees that having more family stability will be beneficial for her academic performance. Olivia, my granddaughter, they had convinced her that moving in with me was her idea, that she had asked for it. "Can I speak with Olivia?" I asked, needing to hear her side of the story. "Of course," Jessica said, but her tone shifted subtly, although she's been a bit confused lately. "Yesterday she asked me if it was true that you were sick. I explained that you're not exactly sick, but that sometimes older people need more support than they're willing to admit." Confused. My granddaughter was confused because they were feeding her conflicting versions of reality, manipulating her until she no longer knew what to believe. When Olivia got on the phone, her voice sounded small, insecure. "Grandma, is it true we're going to live with you? Do you want to live with me, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to understand if the decision was really hers. There was a long pause. "Mom says you need us, that you're lonely, and that I can help you remember things you sometimes forget." Remember things I forget. They had turned my own granddaughter into a kind of memory nurse for a grandmother who had no memory problems. "Olivia, honey, have I forgotten anything important when we've been together?" My granddaughter sighed. "No, Grandma. But Mom says that people with memory problems don't always realize they have them. Like my friend Sophia's grandpa, who got lost one day going to the grocery store and couldn't remember how to get home." My heart broke a little more. They had used the example of an elderly man with dementia to explain to a 16-year-old girl why her perfectly healthy grandmother needed constant supervision. That afternoon, while watering the plants in my small yard, I saw Jessica and Kevin parked across the street, watching my house. They weren't trying to hide. They wanted me to see them, wanted me to know they were watching me, documenting my every move. When I went out to check the mailbox, Kevin raised his phone and started recording a video, probably to show as evidence that I was acting erratically by staring at them from my own yard. That night, sitting in my kitchen, after finding the recorder, something changed inside me. It wasn't a scream or a tantrum or even tears. It was something much colder and more calculated. It was the exact moment I stopped being the victim and became the hunter. I took the small recorder in my fingers, examined it under the lamplight, and smiled. For the first time in days, I truly smiled, because Jessica had just made her first mistake. She had underestimated her mother. I got up slowly, walked to my bedroom, and pulled a shoebox from under the bed that I hadn't opened in years. Inside were all the important documents of my life, the deed to my house, my bank certificates, insurance policies, but also something more valuable, the letters. All the letters Jessica had sent me over the years, asking for money, promising payments that never came, inventing emergencies that I later discovered were lies. Each one signed in her own hand, dated, some even with postmarks proving the exact dates. There were also the photographs, pictures of Jessica at expensive parties while she told me she didn't have money for Olivia's school supplies. Photos in lavish restaurants uploaded to her social media on the same day. She called me crying because she couldn't pay the rent, pictures from beach vacations she had paid for with money I had lent her, supposedly, for medical emergencies. Every image was proof of her lies, documentation of her constant manipulation. But I needed more. I needed professional help. The next day, Saturday morning, I searched online for lawyers specializing in family law, not just any lawyer, but someone who would understand exactly what kind of psychological warfare was being waged against me. I found the firm of Patricia Evans, a woman my age who specialized in cases of family manipulation and emotional abuse. Her online reviews spoke of a lawyer who was not easily intimidated and had experience defending seniors against abusive family members. I called her from my landline, knowing Jessica had probably found some way to monitor my cell phone. The secretary gave me an appointment for Monday morning. "It's urgent," I explained. "I believe my family is trying to have me declared incompetent to get their hands on my assets." The woman on the other end of the line sighed sympathetically. "It's more common than you think, ma'am. Miss Evans has seen many similar cases." Over the weekend, while Jessica and Kevin continued to drive by my street to check on my well-being, I became a detective in my own life. I reviewed every bank statement from the last 5 years, documenting every unpaid loan, every fabricated emergency. The total was staggering, more than $50,000 that Jessica had gotten from me with false promises and emotional blackmail. Money I had worked overtime to earn, that I had saved by denying myself small luxuries, that I had set aside thinking of Olivia's future. I also began to document the current harassment. Every time I saw them watching my house, I took pictures from the window. I wrote down the exact times of their visits. I recorded the phone conversations where Jessica made veiled threats. I installed an app on my phone that automatically saved backups of all my texts and calls to the cloud. If they wanted to play dirty, I was going to be prepared. On Monday, I arrived early at Patricia Evans's office. It was a small but professional space with shelves full of law books and framed diplomas on the walls. Patricia Evans was an elegant woman in her 60s, with perfectly coiffed silver hair and a gaze that seemed to see right through lies. "Tell me what's happening," she said, and her voice had that calm authority that only comes with years of experience. I told her everything, from the Sunday meatballs to the hidden recorder, from the fake Facebook posts to the social worker's visit. I laid out all the letters, photographs, bank statements, and social media screenshots on her desk. Miss Evans reviewed each document in silence, making occasional notes, nodding gravely at certain points. "Carol," she said, finally, taking off her glasses to clean them, "you are the victim of what we call intergenerational financial and emotional abuse. It's a very sophisticated form of manipulation where adult children use emotional blackmail and psychological pressure to control their aging parents." Aging, that word again. "However," she continued, "you have something that many of my clients don't have when they get here: extensive documentation and a completely clear mind about what is happening." She explained that Jessica's plan was a classic in these cases. First, create a public narrative where I was a negligent and possibly unstable mother. Second, use that narrative to justify their intervention in my life, moving into my house under the pretext of caring for me. Third, once inside, document any behavior they could interpret as evidence of my mental decline. Fourth, use that evidence to obtain legal power over my finances and property, supposedly for my own good. How much time do you think I have before they file the lawsuit? I asked. The lawyer consulted her notes. Based on the social worker's visit and the other lawyer's assessment, I'd say they plan to file the papers within the next 2 weeks. They want to act fast before you can get organized or seek legal help. 2 weeks. I had 2 weeks to completely dismantle the plan they had been building for months. What can we do? I asked. And for the first time in days, my voice sounded firm, resolute. Patricia Evans smiled, and that smile had a predatory edge to it that reassured me immensely. We are going to give them a surprise they will never forget. But first, I need you to remain calm and continue acting as if you know nothing. It's crucial that they don't suspect you are preparing to fight back. She laid out the plan. For the next few days, I would continue to play the part of the confused victim they expected me to be. Meanwhile, she would file a preemptive lawsuit for extortion, defamation, and harassment. She would also request a temporary restraining order that would prevent them from coming near my property while the case was being resolved. But most importantly, she added, we are going to file a suit for financial fraud with all the documentation you've brought me. $50,000 in unpaid loans with documentary evidence is a solid case. I left the office feeling different, lighter, but also more dangerous. Jessica had spent so much time seeing only the mother she had known her whole life that she hadn't noticed that I had changed, too. I had learned. I had grown stronger over the years. That afternoon, when I got home, I found a message from Jessica on my answering machine. Hi, Mom. Just wanted to let you know that the move will be next Saturday. We've already rented the truck, and Kevin has gotten some friends to help with the furniture. I also hired a cleaning service to get your house perfect before we arrive. I know you're nervous, but it's going to be wonderful. Olivia is so excited she hasn't been able to sleep. I'll see you tomorrow to coordinate the final details. Love you, Mom. Next Saturday, 7 days. They had unilaterally decided that in 1 week they would be living in my house, sleeping in my bed, controlling every aspect of my daily life. Jessica had ended her message with, I love you. Those 3 words she had used as a weapon for years, knowing my mother's heart would always soften upon hearing them. But this time, instead of pain, I felt something akin to amusement. That night, before sleeping, I dialed Patricia Evans's number from my landline. Patricia, I said when she answered, I think we need to speed up our timeline. They're planning to move into my house next Saturday. There was a pause, then a low, satisfied laugh. Perfect. That gives us exactly what we need to prove the pattern of invasion and control. Carol, I hope you're ready, because the next 2 weeks are going to be intense. I hung up the phone and sat on my bed. In the room Jessica had decided was no longer mine, surrounded by the objects I had collected over a lifetime of honest work. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly, because I finally had a plan. And unlike Jessica's plan, mine was based on truth, on justice, and on the quiet strength that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you're capable of when you're pushed too far. The following days were the strangest of my life. On the outside, I continued to play the role of the confused, vulnerable mother Jessica expected to see. I answered her calls with the appropriate trembling voice. I asked the right questions about the details of the move. I even expressed some concerns about how we would all manage in such a small space. But inside, every conversation was like playing chess with someone who doesn't know I've already seen all their moves. On Tuesday morning, Jessica showed up with a folder full of papers. Mom, she said with that radiant smile she reserved for special occasions. I brought some documents for us to sign. They're just formalities to make living together easier. Formalities. I sat at my dining room table, the same one where I had signed so many checks for her emergencies, and reviewed each paper with the attention of someone pretending to be confused, but who was actually memorizing every detail. The first document was a cohabitation agreement, where I officially authorized Jessica, Kevin, and Olivia to live in my house indefinitely. The second was an authorization for Jessica to make decisions about my medical care in case of an emergency. The third, and most insidious, was a limited power of attorney that allowed her to access my bank account for household expenses and family needs. It was all written in legal language that sounded protective, but in reality, it turned me into a tenant in my own home. "It's a lot of text," I said, feigning being overwhelmed by the fine print. "Could you explain what each thing means?" Jessica sighed with that perfected, exaggerated patience. "It's very simple, Mom. We're just making sure that if something happens to you, we can help you immediately, without having to wait for bureaucratic red tape. Can you imagine if you had a medical emergency and I couldn't authorize your treatment because I'm not your legal guardian?" The word hung in the air like a threat disguised as protection. "Of course, sweetheart," I replied, picking up a pen. "But let me read everything calmly. These eyes aren't what they used to be." Jessica nodded sympathetically. "Of course. Take your time. Kevin and I are going to measure the rooms to see how to arrange the furniture." While they walked off with their tape measure, I photographed every page of every document with my phone. Patricia Evans was going to have a lot of new material for our lawsuit. I didn't sign anything, of course. When they came back, I told them I needed to check with my doctor first, that I had read somewhere that older people should have medical supervision before making important legal decisions. Jessica tensed visibly. "Mom, you don't need medical supervision to sign a family agreement. That's for much more serious things." But I held my ground with the apparent stubbornness of an obstinate old woman. "No, sweetie. I want to be sure. Dr. Harris has always told me to read everything before I sign." That afternoon, while Jessica and Kevin went out to buy things for the move, I was at the bank, discreetly transferring the majority of my savings to a new account at a different institution. I also updated my will with a trusted notary, ensuring Olivia remained my primary heir, but adding specific clauses that prevented Jessica from accessing those funds until my granddaughter turned 21. Every legal move I made was silent, invisible, properly documented. On Wednesday, I received a call that changed everything. It was Olivia, but her voice sounded different, smaller, like when she was a little girl and was afraid of something. "Grandma Carol," she whispered, "can I ask you something important?" "Of course, sweetheart. What's wrong?" There was a long pause, as if she were gathering the courage to speak. "Is it true that you're sick? Mom and Kevin have been talking a lot in low voices, and I heard something about doctors and medicine. I'm scared you're going to die like my friend Sophia's grandma." My heart broke and hardened at the same time. They had frightened my granddaughter, planted in her mind the possibility that I was dying to justify their move-in plan as an act of family compassion. "Olivia, honey," I said with all the firmness I could muster, "I am not sick. I'm perfectly fine. What exactly did you hear Mom and Kevin say?" My granddaughter lowered her voice even more. "I heard Kevin say something about speeding up the process before it gets worse." And Mom replied that the symptoms are already obvious to anyone who knows what to look for. "Grandma, what symptoms? Does something hurt? Is that why you seem confused sometimes when we talk on the phone?" Obvious symptoms. They had been interpreting every natural pause in my conversations, every moment of reflection, every time I needed a second to process their manipulations, as evidence of cognitive decline. "Olivia," I said, "I want you to do a very important favor for me. The next time Mom and Kevin are talking about me, try to listen to what they're saying and tell me. Can you do that for me?" My granddaughter hesitated. "Isn't that like spying? It's like looking out for your grandma. Sometimes adults say things that aren't true when they think kids aren't listening." Olivia promised she would, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had a real ally in this silent war. On Thursday, Patricia Evans called with news. "Carol, we have an interesting situation. My private investigator discovered something about Kevin that is going to completely change this case." My heart raced. "What did he find?" "Kevin isn't who he says he island. His real name is Joaquin Herrera Vasquez, and he has a criminal record for fraud and embezzlement. He's been using a false identity to build a relationship with your daughter. Furthermore, he's legally married to another woman in Guadalajara and has 2 children with her. Married." Kevin was married to another woman. His whole romance with Jessica, the entire plan to form a perfect family, was an elaborate lie. There's more, Patricia continued. The apartment where he and Jessica supposedly live is registered to a shell company he created. They don't pay rent because the place doesn't legally exist as a residence. They've been living in an unpermitted commercial space, which means they are desperate to find a real place to live. It all fit together perfectly. The sudden urgency to move into my house, the rush to get me to sign legal documents, the psychological manipulation to make me seem incompetent. It wasn't just greed, it was a desperate scam by two criminals who were running out of options. What do we do with this information? I asked. Tomorrow, Friday, I'm filing the full complaint. Fraud, bigamy, identity theft, trespassing, and financial abuse of an elder. They'll be in jail before they can say, moving day. That night, Jessica called me earlier than usual. Her voice had a new urgency, a poorly disguised desperation. Mom, we need to talk about something important. Can I come over right now? She arrived in less than 10 minutes, without Kevin, which was unusual. She looked nervous, agitated, as if she'd been arguing with someone. Mom, she began without preamble. I need you to lend me money. It's a real emergency this time, not like the other times. The other times. She was finally admitting the previous emergencies had been lies. How much do you need? I asked, playing my part as the concerned mother. $20,000? I know it's a lot, but it's absolutely necessary. I promise I'll pay you back as soon as we move in and get the family finances sorted out. Family finances. As if I were part of a company where my function was to provide capital and they made the decisions. Jessica, that's a lot of money. What exactly do you need it for? Her eyes darted toward the window, to the street where Kevin was probably waiting in the car. It's complicated, Mom. There are some legal matters we have to resolve before the move. Nothing serious, just bureaucratic procedures that require temporary deposits. Legal matters. Temporary deposits. They were trying to buy time, probably to flee if their plan fell apart. Sweetheart, I said with all the sweetness I could feign, I don't have that amount available in cash. I'd have to go to the bank tomorrow and make special arrangements. Jessica visibly relaxed. Perfect. We'll go to the bank together tomorrow morning. I can help you with the paperwork so you don't get confused with all those complicated forms. Confused with forms. To the very end, she continued to underestimate my mental capacity. All right, I agreed. But it will have to be early. I have an appointment with Dr. Harris at 11. I lied about the doctor's appointment because I needed an excuse to be out of the house when Patricia filed the lawsuit. Jessica seemed satisfied. Perfect. We'll see you at 8 o'clock sharp at your house. And Mom, thank you. I know I haven't been the perfect daughter, but this is going to fix everything between us. These are going to be the best years of our lives. The best years of our lives. As I watched her walk away toward the car where Kevin was waiting, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of sadness and satisfaction. Tomorrow, when they arrived at my house expecting $20,000 and total access to my life, they would instead find court officers with arrest warrants. Jessica's perfect plan was about to become her perfect ruin. And the most beautiful part of it all was that she would never see it coming. At 7:50 on Friday morning, I was already dressed and waiting by my living room window. I had slept little, but I felt more awake than ever. It was like the morning of a surgery where I was both the surgeon and the patient. At exactly 8 o'clock, Jessica's car pulled up in front of my house. Kevin was with her, which confirmed my suspicion that this wasn't just a trip to the bank, but the final move in their game. I went out to greet them with the trembling smile of a grateful mother. Good morning, my dears. You're so punctual. Jessica kissed my cheek with that perfected affection. Of course, Mom. We know how important this is to you. To me. As if the money they were about to steal was a favor they were doing for me. Kevin greeted me with that fake familiarity that I now found disgusting, but I kept up my act. In a few hours, he would be explaining to police officers why he had been using false identity documents. Ready to go to the bank? Jessica asked, checking her watch. I want to make sure we have enough time before your doctor's appointment. I nodded docilely. I took my purse, which held all the documents Patricia had given me, and we walked to the car. During the drive, Kevin drove while Jessica explained in lavish detail how we would manage our shared finances once we were living together. It's going to be so practical, Mom, she said, turning from the front seat. I'll take care of all the utility payments and grocery shopping. You'll just have to worry about resting and enjoying your granddaughter. Just worry about resting. As if I were an invalid who needed others to manage even the most basic decisions of her life. And Kevin has a lot of experience in finance, she added, placing her hand on his shoulder. He's going to help us invest your money more wisely. Invest my money, Kevin nodded solemnly in the rearview mirror. Carol, I've been analyzing your financial situation, and I think we can make your money work much better for you. There are some investment opportunities that could double your savings in less than a year. Investment opportunities. The same man who had been living illegally in a commercial space and had a record for fraud was offering me financial advice. We arrived at the bank at 8:40. It was a small branch I knew well, where all the employees greeted me by name after so many years of being a customer. Good morning, Mrs. Delgado, the head teller said as we approached her window. How can we help you today? Jessica immediately stepped forward. My mother needs to make a significant transfer. Could you help us with the forms? She sometimes gets confused with all the fine print. The teller looked at me with that understanding reserved for elderly clients who bring family to help them with complicated transactions. Of course. What kind of transfer do you need to make, Mrs. Delgado? Before I could answer, Jessica placed a sheet of paper on the counter with the details of a bank account I didn't recognize. She needs to transfer $20,000 to this account. It's for urgent family expenses. The teller looked at the numbers and frowned slightly. This account is registered to a business. Are you sure these are the correct details? Jessica answered before I could speak. Yes, it's the account for the construction company that's going to do some repairs on my mother's house. It's easier to handle the payments this way. A construction company. Every lie flowed from her mouth with a smoothness that gave me chills. Well, I said finally, taking out my ID, before I make any transfer, I need to check my account balances. Could you print out my full statement? The teller nodded and began typing on her computer. Jessica tensed visibly. Mom, you don't need to review all of that. Just make the transfer and let's go. We're going to be late for your appointment. But I had already begun my final performance. No, sweetie. I've been very worried about my money lately. Sometimes I feel like I lose track of my expenses. The teller handed me the papers, and I reviewed them with the exaggerated focus of someone pretending to be confused. You know what? I said to Jessica. I think it's better if I come back tomorrow with more time. This is a lot of money, and I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing. Jessica's face completely transformed. The mask of the loving daughter cracked for a second, and I saw the real desperation underneath. Mom, we can't wait until tomorrow. I explained that it's urgent. If we don't pay today, we're going to lose. We're going to have serious problems. Serious problems. Kevin took her arm, trying to calm her down, but I saw panic in his eyes too. Carol, he said in that controlled voice he used when trying to sound authoritative. Jessica is right. It's important that you make this transfer today. Excuse me, the teller interrupted, but I'm noticing that you're putting a lot of pressure on her. It's bank policy to ensure our senior clients make financial decisions without outside coercion. Without outside coercion. The words hung in the air like a direct accusation. Jessica stiffened. We're not pressuring anyone. We're family. We're just trying to help her remember her own decisions. At that moment, my cell phone rang. It was Patricia Evans, exactly as we had planned. Excuse me, I said to Jessica and Kevin. It's my doctor. It must be about my test results. I answered the phone, making a big show of walking a few steps away for privacy. Carol? Patricia said in the professional voice we had rehearsed. I need you to come to my office immediately. There's something urgent we need to discuss regarding your legal situation. I returned to Jessica and Kevin, feigning concern. I have to go, I announced. My doctor needs to see me urgently. Something about my tests. Jessica paled. What kind of tests? Are you sick? Why didn't you tell me anything? Her concern sounded genuine for the first time in weeks, but it was too late for acts of motherly affection. I don't know, I lied. She just said it was urgent. The transfer will have to wait. Kevin stepped forward aggressively. Carol, you can't leave now. This transfer can't wait. If you don't do it today, we're going to. You're going to what? I asked, and for the first time, my voice hardened. Kevin stopped, realizing he had been about to reveal too much. We left the bank in a tense silence. Jessica walked ahead, dialing numbers on her phone with trembling fingers. Kevin drove with the forced concentration of someone trying not to explode. "Where do you need to go?" Jessica asked when we got to my house. "The medical center," I replied vaguely. "Do you want me to come with you?" "No, sweetie. You need to get things ready for the move tomorrow." "The move tomorrow." Jessica nodded distractedly, but I could see her mind was elsewhere, probably calculating how much time they had before their situation became untenable. I got out of the car and said goodbye with my usual forced normality. "See you later," I said. "And don't worry about the money. We'll go to the bank tomorrow without fail and sort everything out." I watched them drive away from my window, Jessica talking animatedly on the phone, Kevin's hands gripping the steering wheel. They had no idea that instead of going to the medical center, I was on my way to Patricia Evans's office to witness the filing of the lawsuit that would destroy their lives. They didn't know that in 2 hours, court officers would be knocking on the door of their non-existent apartment with arrest warrants. As I changed my clothes to go see the final act, my phone rang. It was Olivia. "Grandma," she whispered, "something weird is happening. Mom and Kevin came home yelling, and he just left with a suitcase. Mom is crying and saying something about how everything is ruined and that she knew more than she let on. Grandma, did you know something was going to happen?" "Yes, sweetheart," I said, and for the first time in weeks my voice was completely calm. I knew exactly what was going to happen. And now, everything is going to be okay. Because the moment had finally arrived when Jessica would discover that underestimating her mother had been the costliest mistake of her life. The moment she would learn that silence and patience can be the most powerful weapons in the world when wielded by someone who knows exactly how and when to strike. 2 hours later, I was sitting in Patricia Evans's office when her secretary came in with a triumphant smile. "Miss Evans, they've just confirmed the warrants have been executed. Mr. Joaquin Herrera was arrested at the airport, trying to board a flight to Guadalajara with false documents. Miss Jessica Delgado was served with the lawsuit at her residence." Patricia looked at me with the professional satisfaction that only comes after a perfectly executed victory. "Carol, the war has officially begun, and we just won the first battle." My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Call after call from Jessica that I didn't answer, following Patricia's instructions not to have direct contact until she was present. But I could see the message notifications piling up. After the 10th missed call, Patricia nodded. "Let's hear what she has to say. But remember, don't respond to anything. Just document everything for the case." I put the phone on speaker and we played the first voicemail. Jessica's voice was hysterical, completely different from the controlled woman I had known for weeks. "Mom, what have you done? Why are there police looking for Kevin? Why did I get legal papers saying you're suing me? I don't understand what's happening. Call me immediately." Immediately. The second message was worse. "Mom, this is crazy. You don't understand what they're doing to you. Someone is manipulating you, using you against your own family. Call me, please. We can fix this." The third message broke my heart, but it also hardened my resolve. "Mom, it's me, Jessica, your daughter. The daughter you carried, you raised, you loved. How could you do this to me? How can you believe lies about me?" Olivia is crying, asking why her grandma wants to hurt her mommy. "Is that what you want? To hurt your own granddaughter?" Olivia. They had started using my granddaughter as an emotional shield, exactly as Patricia had predicted they would. Patricia took notes on each message. "Typical pattern of manipulation," she murmured. "First denial, then victimization, then emotional blackmail using the minor. They'll escalate to direct threats in the next few hours." As if on cue, the fourth message confirmed her words. "Mom, if you don't call me in 1 hour, I'm going to have to take drastic measures. I'm going to tell the truth about your mental condition. I'm going to release the recordings where you clearly show signs of dementia. Don't make me expose you publicly." Recordings. Confirmation that they had been recording our conversations without my consent, probably looking for moments where they could make my voice sound confused or incoherent. Perfect additional evidence. Patricia commented as she transcribed each threat. Emotional extortion, blackmail, illegal recording of private conversations. They are digging their own grave with every message. By 3 in the afternoon, after we had documented 12 progressively more threatening voicemails, Patricia decided it was time for the next phase. Carol, now we're going to give them a response, but it will be through the proper channels. She dialed a number on her phone. Officer Vargas, this is Attorney Evans. It's time to execute the restraining order. Miss Delgado is violating the no-contact provision and escalating to direct threats. An hour later, after I was already back in my house, the police arrived. Not to arrest me, as Jessica had threatened, but to serve her with a restraining order that prohibited her from coming near my property, contacting me by any means, or using Olivia's name in her manipulations. I could see from my window when they arrived at the address where she supposedly lived. The surprise on the officer's face when he discovered the address corresponded to an abandoned commercial storefront was almost comical. That night, Jessica escalated to public desperation. She couldn't call me directly because of the restraining order, but that didn't stop her from creating a massive smear campaign on social media. At 8 o'clock in the evening, she posted a 10-minute video on Facebook titled, "My mother is being manipulated by scammers and needs help." In the video, sitting in what looked like a cheap hotel room, her eyes swollen from crying and her voice broken with emotion, Jessica constructed a narrative where I was a vulnerable senior being exploited by unscrupulous lawyers. My mother, Carol Delgado, is the victim of a terrible legal scam, she said at the beginning of the video, looking directly at the camera with the desperate sincerity that comes only from real panic. A couple of criminal lawyers have convinced her that her own family is exploiting her, when the reality is that we only wanted to take care of her in her golden years. Her golden years. As if my 55 years automatically made me a senile person in need of a guardian. The video was carefully edited to show only the aspects that supported her narrative. It included old family photos from when she was a child, audio clips where my voice sounded tired after long workdays, and testimonials from neighbors confirming that Jessica had always been a loving daughter. What it didn't include, of course, was the evidence of her financial manipulations, her documented lies, or the fact that she had been living with a fugitive criminal. The comments on the video were immediate and predictably emotional. How terrible to do this to an elderly mother. Lawyers are vultures who prey on the elderly. Jessica, fight for your mom. Don't leave her alone with those criminals. Hundreds of people who didn't know me, who had never seen the letters of emotional blackmail or the bank statements, were opining on my mental capacity based on Jessica's convincing performance. But Jessica made a crucial mistake in her desperation. At minute 7 of the video, while explaining how Kevin was a wonderful man who only wanted to protect the family, she inadvertently showed documents that identified him with his fake name. She also specifically mentioned the address of the apartment where they supposedly lived, the same address the police had confirmed was an abandoned commercial space. Patricia had been waiting for exactly this kind of error. Perfect evidence of perjury, she told me when I sent her the video link. She is presenting falsified documents as proof of Kevin's honesty and lying under public oath about her place of residence. This is going to speed up the legal process enormously. That same night, Patricia filed an emergency motion to add additional charges of public defamation and presentation of false evidence. The next day, Saturday, the day originally planned for the move, Jessica showed up on my street with a moving truck and 3 men who had clearly been hired to move furniture. When the police arrived to inform them of the restraining order, Jessica put on a public spectacle that was recorded by several neighbors and later uploaded to social media. Screaming on the sidewalk in front of my house, with real tears streaming down her face, Jessica appealed directly to the empathy of anyone watching. "That's my mother. That's the woman who raised me, and she won't even let me talk to her because some scammers have brainwashed her." The movers looked uncomfortable. They had clearly not been informed that they were participating in a complicated legal situation. The videos from that day went viral locally. Desperate daughter fights to save mother from legal scammers. Family destroyed by unscrupulous lawyers. Elderly woman manipulated against her own family. The headlines were sensational and designed to generate emotional outrage. Jessica had succeeded in becoming the victim of her own story, at least in the court of public opinion. But the video that truly changed everything arrived that same afternoon. Olivia, my 16-year-old granddaughter, posted her own response video on TikTok. No makeup, sitting in what I recognized as the hotel room where they were apparently staying. My granddaughter spoke with a maturity that broke my heart. "Hi, I'm Olivia, the granddaughter of the woman everyone is talking about in these videos. I want you to know that my grandmother is not being manipulated by anyone. My grandmother is the smartest, strongest person I know." Olivia went on to explain, with the brutal honesty that only teenagers possess, how she had witnessed years of financial manipulation by Jessica, how she had seen her grandmother work overtime to pay for her mother's invented emergencies, how she had overheard Jessica and Kevin planning to take over her grandmother's house and money. "My mom is not the victim in this story," Olivia concluded. "My grandma is the victim, and she's finally standing up for herself." Olivia's video received thousands of views in a few hours, and the comments completely changed the tone of the public conversation. "This girl is telling the truth. So brave for defending her grandma. Now I understand what's really going on." Jessica had lost her victim narrative, destroyed by the honest testimony of her own daughter. That night, I received a text message from an unknown number. It was from Jessica, clearly using someone else's phone to bypass the restraining order. "This isn't over. I know secrets about you that would destroy your reputation forever. You have 24 hours to drop the lawsuit or I publish everything." Secrets. After publicly destroying her own credibility, she still believed she had some power over me. The message from Jessica about secrets that would destroy my reputation arrived on a Sunday night. I read those words sitting in my kitchen, a steaming mug of chamomile tea cupped in my hands, and I couldn't help but smile. After so many years of knowing my daughter, after decades of her manipulations, emotional blackmail, and veiled threats, she had finally resorted to her last option: pure, direct extortion. And I had been waiting for that exact moment. Patricia had predicted Jessica would try this. When manipulators lose control, she had explained to me, they always go for public humiliation as their last card. They'll threaten to reveal intimate, embarrassing things, real or invented, just to regain power over their victim. That's why we had prepared what Patricia called the preemptive counteroffensive, a complete file of the entire truth about my life, documented, verified, and ready to be released publicly if necessary. That same night, I forwarded the threatening message to Patricia. Her reply came in less than 10 minutes. Perfect. She just handed us the final piece of evidence we needed for charges of extortion and blackmail. "First thing tomorrow morning, we file the motion to expedite the legal process. Carol, this is no longer just a civil suit. With this message, Jessica just made it a criminal case. A criminal case." The words resonated in my mind with a satisfaction I had never before experienced. On Monday morning, while I was calmly eating breakfast in my kitchen, Patricia executed what she called the masterstroke. Instead of responding directly to Jessica's threats, she publicly released all the documents from our case. The bank statements showing the $50,000 in unpaid loans. The handwritten letters where Jessica promised payments that never came. The screenshots of her lies on social media, Kevin's criminal record. The proof that they had been living illegally in a commercial space. Everything, absolutely everything, was made public. "Carol," Patricia explained over the phone, "when someone threatens to reveal secrets, the best defense is to reveal the whole truth first. Now Jessica can say whatever she wants about you, but anything she publishes will just sound like the desperate revenge of someone who has already been exposed as a fraud." It was a brilliant strategy. It turned Jessica's threats into additional evidence of her lack of credibility. By 10 in the morning, every local news outlet had the full story. Scamming daughter. Targets working mother. $50,000 family fraud uncovered. Fugitive criminal used false identity to defraud senior. The headlines were devastating for Jessica, but this time they were based on verifiable documents, not emotional manipulation. The narrative had completely shifted. It was no longer the story of a senile mother being manipulated by lawyers, but the story of a strong woman defending herself against family exploitation. As Patricia had predicted, Jessica tried to follow through on her threats that afternoon. She posted a 20-minute video titled, "The Dark Secrets My Mother Doesn't Want You to Know." In the video, Sitting in what was clearly an even cheaper motel room than the last, Jessica revealed what she considered my shameful secrets. That I had suffered from depression after my divorce. That I had gone to therapy for a few months. That I had once had too much to drink at a family gathering and had cried about my loneliness. Secrets that weren't secrets. Normal human experiences that any divorced woman my age had lived through. Moments of vulnerability that Jessica had stored away as ammunition for years, waiting for the perfect moment to use them as weapons. But now, after the whole world knew the truth about her scams and lies, these revelations sounded exactly like what they were. The desperate attempts of an abusive daughter trying to humiliate the mother who had finally found the courage to report her. The comments on that video were devastating for Jessica. Seriously? Being depressed after a divorce is a dark secret? This woman is lost, attacking her mother for being human. How pathetic to use someone's depression as a weapon. Instead of destroying my reputation, Jessica had definitively destroyed her own. She had publicly proven the kind of person she was, someone capable of using her mother's most vulnerable moments as tools for revenge. But the response that truly ended everything came that night from an unexpected source: my ex-husband, Jessica's father. Roberto had stayed out of this entire situation for weeks, but Jessica's video had pushed him too far. His response was a public Facebook post that said simply, "Jessica, I have kept quiet for years about your behavior, but this is enough. Your mother is a woman of integrity who worked tirelessly to raise you after our divorce. If anyone has shameful secrets in this family, it's not her." Roberto went on to explain how Jessica had manipulated both of us for years, inventing stories to get money from both sides, lying about Olivia's expenses, creating family drama to keep us apart and prevent us from comparing notes on her scams. "Carol never wanted me to know how much money she was taking from you," he wrote, "because she didn't want to damage your relationship with me. That's the kind of person your mother island, someone who protected you, even when you were hurting her." Roberto's post went viral immediately. An ex-husband publicly defending his ex-wife against their own daughter. It was something people had never seen before. The comments were an avalanche of support for me. What a strong woman. Finally, a mother who stands up for herself. This lady is an example for all women suffering from family abuse. In less than 24 hours, I had gone from being a manipulated old woman to a symbol of resistance against family abuse. On Tuesday morning, Patricia called with news that changed everything definitively. "Carol, Jessica just contacted my office asking for a meeting. She wants to negotiate an out-of-court settlement." A settlement. After weeks of threats, manipulations, smear campaigns, and emotional blackmail, Jessica had finally understood that she had completely lost. "What kind of settlement?" I asked, though I already knew that anything she offered would be too little, too late. "She wants to drop all her claims, return a portion of the money she owes you, and agree to a permanent restraining order in exchange for us not pressing additional criminal charges," Patricia explained. "She's also asking to be allowed to maintain supervised contact with Olivia, since the minor has publicly expressed her desire to live with you." Olivia. My granddaughter had decided for herself where she wanted to be, and it wasn't with the mother who had tried to use her love for her grandmother as a tool of manipulation. "What do you think?" Patricia asked me. I spent several minutes in silence, thinking about all the years of manipulation, all the nights I had lost sleep worrying about Jessica's invented emergencies, all the money I had worked overtime to earn just for her to spend it on luxuries while lying to me about her needs. I thought about how she had tried to steal my house, to have me declared incompetent, to turn my own granddaughter against me. "Patricia," I said finally, "I accept the settlement, but with additional conditions. I want Jessica to publicly acknowledge, with the same reach as her defamatory videos, that she lied about my mental condition and about the circumstances of this case. I want her to publicly apologize to me and to Olivia for the damage she has caused. And I want the contact with Olivia to be supervised by you or a social worker of my choosing, not by someone she appoints." Patricia smiled on the other end of the phone. "I knew you were going to ask for that. It's already included in the proposal I'm about to present to them. Carol, I think we are finally going to close this chapter of your life for good." Closing this chapter. The words carried enormous symbolic weight. It wasn't just the end of a legal case. It was the end of 30 years of allowing Jessica to manipulate me, of being the mother who always gave in, who always forgave, who always put her daughter's emotional needs above her own dignity. That afternoon, while waiting for Jessica's final response to our counter-proposal, I sat in my garden with a cup of coffee, and for the first time in months, I truly looked at the plants I had been caring for years, the roses I had pruned every spring, the herbs I had grown from seed, the small lemon tree I had planted when Olivia was a baby, which now bore sweet fruit every summer. Everything was still there. It had survived this storm, just as I had. 3 months later, I woke up on a Saturday morning to the sound of rain gently tapping against the windows of my bedroom. My bedroom, in my house, in my bed. Those words still filled me with a deep satisfaction every time I thought them. I got up slowly, unhurriedly, because for the first time in years, I didn't have to worry about urgent calls, invented emergencies, or emotional manipulations that would ruin my day of rest. In the kitchen, as I made coffee, I could hear Olivia in her room, talking on the phone with a friend about a school project. My granddaughter had chosen to live with me after everything that had happened, and over these months, we had built a relationship we never could have had under Jessica's manipulative shadow. She was a smart young woman, mature for her 16 years, but with a natural joy that had been hidden for years under the stress of living in an environment of constant lies. Jessica's public apology video had been exactly what I expected, a mechanical exercise in legal compliance where every word sounded forced and resentful. I publicly acknowledged that I lied about my mother's mental condition, she had said, staring blankly at the camera, and that the accusations I made against her were false. I also acknowledged that my behavior caused emotional harm to both my mother and my daughter. Not a single word of genuine remorse, not a moment of real reflection on years of emotional abuse. But it didn't matter. The video wasn't for me to get her sincere forgiveness. It was to publicly clear my name and protect my reputation. Jessica had complied with all the terms of the agreement to the letter. She had returned $15,000 of the $50,000 she owed me. She had dropped all her legal claims and had agreed to a permanent restraining order that forbade her from contacting me directly or coming near my property. Her visits with Olivia were limited to 2 hours every Sunday, supervised by a social worker at a neutral center, and only if Olivia expressed a desire to see her. In the last 2 months, Olivia had chosen not to go to those visits more than 3 times. Joaquin had been sentenced to 2 years in prison for fraud, bigamy, and use of falsified documents. During the trial, it was discovered that he had victims in 3 different states, all divorced or widowed women whom he had scammed using the exact same pattern of manipulation he had attempted with me. His arrest had made national news, becoming a case study on con artists who specialized in exploiting vulnerable older women. That morning, as I drank my coffee and watched the rain, I received a call from Patricia. She was no longer my lawyer in an active case, but we had developed a genuine friendship during those intense months. "Carol," she said with the cheerful voice she always had when she called, "have you seen the news? Your case has inspired a new state law to protect seniors from family financial abuse. They're going to call it Carol's Law." Carol's Law. My name forever associated with protecting others who might be going through what I had been through. In the months following the case, I had received hundreds of messages from women my age who had recognized their own stories in mine. Women who were being manipulated by adult children, who had been giving away their money and their dignity for fear of losing their family's love, who didn't know they had the right to fight back and the strength to do it. "There's something else," Patricia continued. "The local news channel wants to do a documentary about your case. They're particularly interested in the aspect of how a woman can rebuild her life after years of family emotional abuse." A documentary. The idea seemed surreal, but also important. If my story could help other women recognize and escape similar situations, it was worth sharing. After hanging up with Patricia, I went out to my small backyard. The rain had stopped, and the morning sun was creating tiny rainbows in the water droplets clinging to the leaves of my plants. I had spent so much time these past months working in the garden, replanting, rearranging, creating something beautiful from the ground up. It was a perfect metaphor for what I had done with my life. I had uprooted everything toxic and planted something new, something that would grow according to my own decisions. Olivia came out of the house with a mug of hot chocolate in her hands. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" She sat next to me on the small wooden bench we had built together last month. "Of course, sweetheart." My granddaughter looked at me with a seriousness that sometimes reminded me she had grown up too fast due to the circumstances. "Do you ever miss Mom? I mean, do you miss how things were before?" It was a profound question, heavy with the natural guilt children feel when they see adults in conflict. I considered it carefully before answering. "Olivia, I miss the daughter I thought I had. I miss the relationship I believed we had. But I don't miss the lying. I don't miss being manipulated, blackmailed, or treated like an ATM. And I definitely don't miss living in constant fear of what new fabricated crisis was going to ruin my day." My granddaughter nodded slowly. "I don't miss that either. It's weird, but I feel safer here with you than I did living with Mom and Kevin. There was always drama there, always some emergency, always someone yelling or crying or manipulating someone else. Manipulating someone else. It was sad to hear a teenager use that word so naturally, but it was also a sign that Olivia had developed the tools to recognize and resist manipulation in the future. "You know what I like most about living with you?" Olivia continued. "That I can predict what the days will be like. We have breakfast together. I go to school. I come back and do my homework. We have dinner and talk about normal things. There's no made-up drama, no fake crises, no adults asking to borrow money they're never going to pay back. Stability. My granddaughter had found in my home what Jessica had never been able to give her, the emotional stability of a home where words meant what they said and where love didn't come with hidden conditions." That afternoon, while Olivia was studying in her room, I sat at my desk to review my personal finances. It was a ritual I had developed over these months. Every week, I reviewed my accounts, my expenses, my future plans. For the first time in decades, all my money was truly my own. There were no emergencies draining my savings, no loans that would never be repaid, no emotional manipulation disguised as family needs. I had enough money saved for Olivia's future, for my own retirement, and even for some small luxuries I had denied myself for years while funding Jessica's lies. Last month, I had bought myself a new sewing machine, something I had wanted for years but had always put off because there were more important things to spend money on. Now I was making new curtains for the whole house, embroidering tablecloths, creating beautiful things simply because I wanted to. At sunset, Olivia and I made dinner together. It was a routine we had established and both enjoyed immensely. She would tell me about her day at school, about her friends, about her plans for the future. She wanted to study psychology, to specialize in family therapy. "I want to help families like ours," she had told me once, "but help them before things get to the courtroom." It was a noble goal, and I knew she had the personal experience and emotional maturity to be excellent at it. After dinner, as we did every night, we sat in the living room to watch a TV show or just talk. That night, Olivia was working on a school essay about people I admire, and she had chosen to write about me. "Grandma," she said as she typed on her laptop, "what was the hardest part of everything we went through these past few months?" I thought about her question for several minutes. "The hardest part," I said finally, "was realizing that I had to choose between being a good mother and being a person with dignity. For years, I believed I could be both, that I could keep letting Jessica manipulate and abuse me because that's what loving mothers did. I had to learn that real love sometimes requires firm boundaries, even when those boundaries hurt." "And what was the easiest part?" Olivia asked. That answer came immediately. The easiest part was realizing I had the right to defend myself. Once I understood that I didn't have to accept abuse just because it came from my own daughter, everything else was just a matter of executing a plan. Olivia smiled and kept writing. Before going to bed, I went out to the garden one last time. It was a clear night, with stars visible despite the city lights. I stood by the lemon tree I had planted when Olivia was a baby, the same tree that had borne sweet fruit through all these years of family turmoil. I touched its strong trunk, its branches that had grown more robust with each season they survived. Jessica had never contacted me again after the legal agreement. There were no birthday calls, no holiday messages, no attempts at genuine reconciliation, and that was okay. I had learned that some relationships are too toxic to be repaired, and that acknowledging that truth didn't make me a bad mother, but a wise woman who had finally put her own emotional survival first. That night, before sleeping, I wrote in the journal I had started during the most difficult days of the legal case. "Today marks 3 months of living without fear," I wrote. 3 months without constantly checking my phone, waiting for the next invented crisis. 3 months of building a life based on honesty, stability, and real love, instead of manipulation. I have been reborn at 55, and I finally understand that it's never too late to decide who you want to be. I closed the journal, turned off the light, and fell asleep in my own bed, in my own house, surrounded by the peaceful silence of a life finally lived on my own terms. Jessica never spoke my name again, and I never looked back.